but I got it down to about 30 seconds instead of 5 minutes. All right, man. Yeah. So we're recording on Zoom. We are Facebook Live. Everybody, I really appreciate you tuning in tonight. And this gentleman who I'm talking with tonight, man, I've been following him for decades. It's been an amazing thing to watch, and the variety of people he has worked with, and I've gotten to see him perform a few times live. And tonight we get to meet face to face here, and so we're going to just talk about some of the wonderful and amazing things this gentleman has done. And his name is George Whitty. How you doing, my friend?
I'm good. How are
Well,
things
welcome.
out there in Syracuse? We got 2.5 feet of snow here in Twin Peaks, California.
Whoa. Wait, so where is Twin Peaks exactly?
It's about 60 miles east of LA up in the mountains. So my house is at 5,600 feet.
Okay.
And yeah, we get snow every year.
Hmm.
So it's great because I ski, my kids ski, my girlfriend skis. So
Oh, cool. Now, so tell me, how much snow did you get?
we got two storms that each dumped a foot or a little more, and we got one more coming on Friday. So,
Okay, well, you got us beat already.
yes.
We had about a foot this week, but we've only had
Okay.
about 2 feet all winter. So we're actually about 2 feet behind schedule in Syracuse, New York.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, well, that's cool. So you ski, you said, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's
I've
something
been
I need to
skiing for
take up.
50 years, I realized. I'm giving away
Wow,
my age, but
you're 51. So this is
that's
great,
right.
man.
I'm a youthful, fresh, new on the scene ingenue.
There you go. Oh man. Well, again, I really appreciate this, man. It's nice to connect with you, and I'll just start off by saying this: is I really admire all the work that you've done that I know of that I've heard. I mean, it's just I love it. You've done a lot of producing, a lot of arranging, composing, touring, performing, and well, you are one of my musical heroes, but you're also working with so many of my musical heroes. We got the Brecker Brothers. I love them, right? Herbie
Yeah.
Hancock, Sanborn, Richard Bona, Chaka Khan. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. And I didn't realize until recently you're in that Supernatural um, with Santana. And what's the guy's
Yeah.
name there? What's the guy's name who sings on that one song?
Dave
But anyway,
Matthews.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Wow. I mean, so really, that's pretty darn impressive, George.
That was an interesting session.
And I don't mean just that. I mean all these people. Plus, there are
Yeah.
countless more. So
Yeah.
I know you have stories, and you really want to tell some of them. We love stories, man. So let's talk about that for a minute. You said Supernatural was an interesting session.
Yeah, Rodney Holmes was playing drums for Santana at that time,
Mhm.
and they were doing those sessions at Electric Lady Studios in New York, which back in the late 60s was Hendrix's kind of studio.
Oh, okay.
Amazing space, down a couple flights of stairs, beautiful Focusrite, console and whatever. And so Rodney recommended me for it, and I think I even got called that day or the day before, and it was like, "Can you show up and do some sessions, recording for this thing?" And of course, I'm thrilled, and we negotiated a little bit of money, and I called my guy who carts all my stuff around,
Excuse me.
and they brought it down, and I set up, and there's Carlos Santana and there's Dave Matthews. I had never met either of them,
Yeah.
and Santana's band was there, and they had two tunes that they wanted to record, and they had nothing going on them yet. Carlos kind of had this idea. I forget what the name of the tune that the one that went on the record was based on, but it was like a classical piece of music. So I went into the lounge, and Carlos is there with his guitar, and I kind of took a piece of paper and made myself a little chord chart. And Dave Matthews is sort of scatting a vocal line for it. There were no words for it at that time.
Hmm.
So we went out and kind of just started putting it together. And there was another tune too that I really wish had ended up on the record, because sometimes you do these sessions and the band like gets into this really cool thing that even if the tune isn't fully fleshed out yet, I don't think that one had a melody on it either, but we got a really, really beautiful rhythm track on it.
Hmm.
And then on that one, Love of My Life, we're kind of working it and we're rehearsing it a little bit. And one thing that I remember is that Carlos likes his amps loud, and they were just in the room with the rest of us. So, and we're kind of putting it together, and this is how this section will go, and this is how this section will go, and this is the basic chords and stuff. And we did some takes, and then somebody got the idea that we should break out into that kind of double time Latin thing at the end. And I'm not really a specialist in the art of Latin piano. It's a whole thing unto itself. And like listening to a real master play it, it's like there's a lot of kind of sneaky harmony in there and stuff.
Hmm.
But I know enough about what it sounds like, and I had done a bunch of playing in Dean Brown's band, and Dean has a lot of that sort of Latin writing.
Hmm.
So we did it. I played kind of what I thought was a Montuno piano part. Everybody was happy with it, and I should have shut up and gone home, but then I said, I think I can do one better. Just, put up an alternate track, and I'll just do another pass. And so I went out there and did another pass, and now, the band is all in the booth listening to this thing, and the microscope is on. So I come in, and everyone's like, well, we liked things about that one better, and we liked some things about the original better. And so we talked a little bit about what those were, and I said, let me go do one more. So I went out and did one more, and now I come into the booth, and Carlos says, George, music is like a flower. It must be encouraged to grow and spread its, leaves to the sun, or whatever it was, something like that. And so I said, okay, let me go see if I can, do one that's more like a flower. So I went out and played another pass. I interpreted that, I guess, as meaning be more gentle as I eased into it, and then expand from there. So I come back into the booth to listen to the playback, and now Carlos says, George, music is like a woman. She must be encouraged to grow and complete herself and all this stuff. And I'm trying to kind of pick out what's what from there. So I went out and played another one, and now I come back in, and the percussionist has ideas for patterns for me to sing. So he's saying, what if it went like ding doop beep doop it boop boop it beep doop it boop beep doop it, like these things, and I'm sure they're common in that world, but they were new to me.
Hmm.
So and it's all moving, and to play that stuff well, you have to like put a bunch of kind of passing harmony in it. So I went out and did several passes at that, and the whole thing took like 2.5 hours. Whereas they were happy with the original thing that I did. So I learned a little lesson on that session about, who's the boss. If they're happy with it,
Interesting. Did you tour with Santana at all?
No. At that time, I think it was still Chester Thompson. And, Chester is one of my very top all-time heroes.
Yeah,
Uh,
love him.
specifically for his work with Tower of Power.
Hmm.
But yeah, never got the call to do any of the live stuff. And then, I thought it was going to be another good, solid Santana record. I had no idea it was going to be that monster, Lot of cool music on there. And that the only tunes I heard until it came out were the ones that I played on. And like I say, somewhere in the can is another really great tune that we did with Dave Matthews. Maybe
Hmm.
one day it'll see the light of day.
Hmm. That's pretty cool. And you
Yeah.
said that was at Electric Lady, New York City?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Wow, that's cool. And just to go back about speaking of Chester Thompson, if I'm correct, there are two Chester Thompsons that are
That's
kind
correct.
of well known as keyboards, and then the drummer, of course.
Right.
Yeah, and was Chester Thompson both Chesters? Did they play with Zappa or just the drummer Chester?
I think it was just the drummer.
Okay.
I think Chester Thompson, the keyboard player, founding member of Tower of Power, and I think he worked with them until like maybe the late 70s or something like that,
Hmm.
maybe early 80s. And then, got with Santana and did that for a long time.
Yeah. So in the studio then, on drums with you was Rodney.
Yeah,
Mhm. When did Dennis Chambers come into the mix of Santana? Because he toured with him.
that was after Rodney. He was like
Okay.
the next guy.
Okay.
You and by that time, that record had blown up and it was like a very well paying gig.
Yeah.
And they also started doing like, residencies at, I think, at the House of Blues in Las Vegas.
Whoa.
And yeah, and that's not a bad way to be on the road, You
Exactly.
get yourself a suite in one of those hotels and you don't have to do a bus,
Yeah.
overnight to the next gig and stuff like that. So,
Gee, that's great, man.
yeah.
So I want to go back a little bit. I first saw you with Brecker Brothers, and one of the times I saw you with them was here in Syracuse. I'm pretty sure it was in 1993, but I don't know for I don't know for
I think it
was
would
it
have been, well, we might have
or
done it more than
92.
once. The one in 92 was our first live gig.
Okay, so I think that was it then. I was just trying to think of who I was who I was working with at the time, and I know I could only catch about an hour of the set. And then I had to split to go to a gig, and I was
Right.
pretty disappointed I had to leave. So
Well, I remember
I left at
Nelson
the last
Rangel's
possible minute,
band.
and then I drove
Yeah,
fast.
yeah.
I'm sorry. What's that? What?
Nelson Rangel's band was there that year, I remember.
Okay,
Um,
I remember that too.
yeah,
I
they
remember.
sounded great too.
Yeah. So let's see. In that band, you had Stern on guitar,
Hmm.
Dennis. That was my first time seeing Dennis.
Yeah. If it was Dennis, then that was 92.
Okay. Yeah, because he was out with the Dan the next year or something.
Right. He
Okay,
was actually
so
out with John McLaughlin,
yeah, that's
that
right.
insane trio that they had with Joey DiFrancesco.
God.
Yeah.
I talked with him about that last year, and
Hmm.
he went into a whole thing about that situation and what it meant to him. I can only imagine how that was.
Yeah, and Dennis loved it.
Yeah.
He's kind of a wide open. Dennis comes to improvise.
Hmm.
You know, Dennis doesn't come to play the same parts every night and so
Yeah.
forth. And that was a great band for that. I mean, for Christ's sake,
Oh
Joey just
man.
by himself is like this unbelievable font of great ideas and new places to go and so forth. So, and then,
But
John on top of it.
oh yeah, there's some great footage on YouTube of all that.
Yeah.
Oh, so I saw a post that you put up sometime this month, I think, and it might have been on the anniversary day of Michael Brecker's passing, and there
Yeah.
was something about was it some skunk funk or
It was, yeah.
and the tempo of that song. And I
Yes.
love you want to share about that because I'd like to hear a little bit more insight. We love stories, right? Stories are great. So here's a story, folks, between
Okay.
Michael and
Well,
Dennis and the tempo. It was so funny.
yeah. We did a tour of Japan. I think Barry Finnerty was on guitar on that one, and you're playing 6 nights a week. That was back when you could do a week each at the Blue Note in Tokyo, the one in
Oh,
Osaka, and the one in Fukuoka, and then some concert halls in addition, and the bottom line in Nagoya, which is where I think that footage is from. And Mike and Dennis got into this thing where they were kind of it was like a contest to see who could play it the fastest. And probably the truth is that that those guys, I mean, when I listened to that thing the other day, the thing that I was really just struck by is how great Genus is playing. The bass player,
Oh,
James Genus,
love
man,
that. Love
is
that guy.
that is a tempo for you. And he is just so spot on it, like really gluing the thing together.
Yeah.
But and so Mike, who's terrible at deadpanning stuff like this, it's always, he could never get away with it. But we would get off, and Mike would say something like, that's a good effort, Dennis. You know, I'm sure you're doing your best. And Dennis would just, like I said in that post, he would just give him a little thing like this, and the next night it would be faster. And it was kind of a contest to see how fast we could play it. And Randy took to saying, when he introduced it, he would say, now we're going to play a song as fast as humanly possible. And he still says that to this day, but it's only about 2/3 as fast as that. So by the end of the tour, it was just crazily fast. And the truth is that it sits better as a funk tune. The original pocket tempo of that is a great tempo to play that song at. But we were playing it, what, 70% faster or something like that. And
Yeah.
neither one of them was at their limit. Dennis could play it faster, Mike could play it faster. My
Crazy.
parts aren't so hard, you know.
Yeah.
So, but the
That's
solo that Mike takes on it, and the solo that he took on it every night, is just, you know, shockingly complete in every way. Like the development of the melodic ideas, the harmony that just comes spilling out of that horn. That's all, wherever he goes with it, it's all so beautifully coherent. And
well, he certainly
yeah.
had a way of building solos, man. And in fact, I remember that night, that afternoon, really at the Syracuse Jazz Fest. I remember him. I don't know what tune it was. I just remember him developing this solo. It was a long solo, and that what would happen is there would be this tension, and then a release, and then more tension and a release, and he never like all great players like yourself and Randy and everybody. It's just you leave us wanting more because there's more that can be done. But that's just something that's really special. That the development is so beautiful, so intense in so many ways.
Some of that I think probably comes from Randy too,
Hmm.
because Randy is sort of a specialist at taking an idea and turning it inside out and
Hmm.
developing like a motif or something.
Yeah.
Um, there's a record that he made with Dave Liebman, and I think it's live at the Village Vanguard or something. That's a really great example of Randy, because I think at heart Randy's still got a lot of bebopper in there,
Hmm. Hmm.
and he's perfectly happy to play solos on like a bebop feel or standard changes or something like that. But I know Randy had a big influence on Mike, and they both have what I call the monk gene, the Thelonious Monk gene, where if it's too consonant, like they just wither. They don't want that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, each chord ideally has some funny wrinkle to it, but it's not just gratuitous dissonance. It's like a different pathway
Hmm.
through what in other people's hands would be a more ordinary set of changes. And it was like that. I produced a couple records for Randy and a couple for Mike after we did the Brecker Brothers. And even like, there's a big sophisticated tag at the end of African Skies.
Hmm.
And I took some of the melodic ideas from earlier in the tune and came up with these things that I meant to be like passing chords, but it turned into like quite a chordal passage. And it was really quite cool, and it fit under the fragments of the melody really beautifully. But when I played it for Mike, he had me play it for him like 4 or 5 times, and I could see what was going on in there was that the chords
Excuse me.
weren't perverse enough. And
Oh,
finally he signed off on it, but
Mhm.
it took some doing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So when did you originally connect with the Brecker Brothers? Was it
Well, I had
both
been
of them in
working
the?
with Ileani Elias, who's
Oh
a
yeah.
brilliant piano player.
Hmm.
Like for all the accolades she's got, I personally think she's even better than that. And she was doing like she had made kind of a record with a lot of production on it, and she felt like she wanted to have somebody play the production so she could just focus on the piano.
I see.
And my friend Joel Rosenblatt, who was playing
Oh yeah.
drums with her at the time,
Hmm.
and I knew Joel. We had been doing some gigs with Dave Mann, a great saxophonist in New York, and we'd done some other gigs together. And he recommended me to Ileani, and so that was my first exposure to like a world class jazz gig. So I made sure that I pretty well kicked her butt with it and figured out how I was going to play a whole lot of production on her stuff. There was even a tune that she did. She's a good singer too, and she had done this kind of take six arrangement of of melodies she had written that went boop bip like this, except every one of those chords had some gorgeous Ileani voicing under it, like six parts.
Wow.
And I had an 8-track reel-to-reel tape recorder, so I took that and figured out what the harmony was and sang it like line by line. And then I cut it up so that each syllable was a different note, and I assigned them in a sampler so that if I played up a chromatic scale, it would go and that way I could do it live.
Okay.
And she was pretty struck by that, I think, and I think it indicated to her that I could kind of find a way to do anything.
That's great, man.
Randy needed to get some demos done because they were talking about getting the Brecker Brothers back together, and Ileani recommended me to him. They were married
Yeah.
for a while.
Hmm.
And of course, then I was a very early adopter of the sequencer, like the MIDI sequencer, like do
Hmm.
your own arrangement in your bedroom thing.
Hmm.
So I made sure those were great, and those kind of became the basis of some of the tunes on that first Return of the Brecker Brothers record. And then, without ever hearing me play, they asked me if I wanted to be in the live band, which I thought was, gee, that's interesting.
Hmm.
But it's kind of classic Mike and Randy, and it tends to work out when they do that. And as it happens, I was definitely ready to do that gig when it came along, but it was still a weird leap of faith of theirs. And yeah, and
That's
that
cool,
was that.
man.
I never expected to. It was supposed to be one record and one tour, but both Mike and Randy were having so much fun with it, and it was so successful that we kept going. We did it for another 4 years, and then off and on after that. So
Yeah, your association with the Brecker Brothers goes long. It's a long, what, 20 something years, and then post, Michael when he passed, you still do these things with Randy, and
hmm
um, that's amazing. Yeah, so I was at the one there. So I think that was your first gig. Then you mentioned here in Syracuse in
yeah,
'92, first gig of the tour.
yeah. And I
Great, man.
remember, there's so much stuff going on in there. One thing that we had, there was a beautiful tune on there called African Skies,
Hmm.
and Mike had assumed we couldn't do it because it had all these percussion parts and a kalimba part that's sort of like a ostinato that goes throughout the piece. But again, I took all that stuff and recreated it at home, or maybe I got the original tracks, and I made these loops that I could trigger from the bottom of the keyboard.
Yeah.
And so I set it up so that when I hit the low A, like the intro loop would start to play, and Dennis would be playing the cymbals. And
Hmm.
then on cue, we would go to the next section, and I would hit the next key up, and now the percussion comes in and so forth. And then it was like a 4-bar loop for a lot of it. And then we would come to this place where it modulated up a half step or a whole step, and I would hit another key. But I was busy playing all this other stuff, all this other production to make it work. And Dennis had the loop and a click in his headphones.
Yeah.
And sometimes like I'd be like playing a chord and I'd reach over and stab the next key, and either it would be the wrong key or I'd be like a half beat ahead because I was so busy trying to manage all this other stuff. And I still remember looking back at Dennis, and he would just go like this. Like,
I,
not vibed out or anything like that, but just, and then he would have to kind of adapt,
yeah,
and the tempo. Um,
that's really, these stories are just so interesting though. I mean,
yeah,
it's,
it was a
you're
way to
dealing,
do that tune though, and
yeah,
that
yeah,
was the closer of the night,
yeah.
which was, I think maybe we played Skunk Funk after that, but
I
and it had
probably
all this gorgeous Mike Stern stuff on it too.
I probably know the song. I just can't hear it in my head because I'm not good with names of songs. But
Uh, Let me think what the melody on that one was.
my friend Brian Scherer is watching.
What's that?
Oh, my friend Brian Scherer is with us here. He's a
Mhm.
great saxophonist I worked with for many years. And Brian, you love the Brecker Brothers, George Whitty, all them. I know you do, brother. Yeah, it's great to see Brian here. Um, yeah, that's really cool. So that's 92. Um, I mean, what was it like for you overall? I'm just curious. It had to be an awesome situation musically,
The
right?
most awesome thing about it is that they're the sweetest people in the universe. Everybody. Mike Stern
Yeah.
was great. I remember we did the first rehearsal, and this is the other thing about those guys, is that they're very rehearsal averse. They write really hard music, but they just don't want to rehearse. They don't like to rehearse. And nobody really likes to rehearse, but so a typical day of rehearsing with them, I think we booked 3 days at what was the name of that studio? Rehearsal studio on the west side. And all this gear gets carted in. Mike's Iwi was like 300-pound racks of stuff, and I had a rack of keyboard stuff,
Hmm.
and all this. Randy had a rack of stuff. And so the first day we kind of mostly got the stuff working and troubleshot. And then, finally we're ready to play a piece of music. But Randy has ordered food, or no, Dennis has ordered food. And the food shows up, so Dennis is going to eat. And Randy sees the food, and that makes Randy think, well, I'm going to order something too. So we did that, kind of the rotating food orders for another while. And then at some point that night, I think like by 7 o'clock or something, we finally rehearsed something. And I believe it was this tune called Above and Below,
Hmm.
uh, which is, got a lot of stuff in it. Really great writing from Randy. It's one of my favorite tunes of his. And again, this really dense harmony. These chords are going flying by, and yet they're all really perfect. Like there's cadences and tension and resolution between this stuff. A lot of weird hits, but I was well rehearsed on all this stuff, you better believe. But then, Mike takes a solo on it. Then Randy takes a solo on it. Then Mike Stern takes a solo on it. And then everybody looks at me. And none of these people had ever heard me take a solo on anything before. And I remember I was just like paralyzed with fright, really, because I can play that stuff. There's on that Barcelona video, there's a good solo that I took on.
Mm, I've seen that.
But I
Yeah.
was just so freaked out that those guys were all looking at me that like I could barely put two notes together. And then
Wow.
I remember I heard Dennis on the phone in the room next door like a half hour later, and he seemed like he was kind of upset about something. And I was like, oh no, he's telling his manager to get a new keyboard player in there or something like that. And of course, that was far from the truth. He told me later that he had recommended me to Schofield to do some stuff.
Oh,
But
cool.
yeah, everybody was sweet and supportive, and I think that's one of the things Mike liked about it, and Randy too, was it
Hmm.
was just a good vibe all the time.
That's
Um,
that's really good. It's really it really helps a situation to have that kind of an energy and that. You know, I don't know any of them well. I know Dennis, not super well, but we can talk, and he's always so sweet when we talk. I've talked with Randy, and he was just so patient with me. He had no reason to be patient with me, but he spent an hour with me. I was just, oh, geez, man. We didn't really talk about music that much either, except for the interview we did for Double Dealin', where he was talking
Yeah.
about you. Michael, I only met once briefly. It was just a handshake. Hello, how you doing? Mike Stern, I've met many times. He's always so nice. So, you know, that kind of that's really nice to have that energy between people, that respect, trust, chemistry, and then you go out and you hit it and you're just burning.
Yeah, and I learned some lessons that have served me well since then from that experience because we did the record kind of just by building on the demos that I had done and this other producer Max Risenhoover had done. And then as soon as we got into the studio, like that tune Spherical,
Mm.
that thing,
Yeah.
Mike Stern says, I feel like we should open this up a little bit. And he came up with that business of doon, 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 doon,
Okay.
big space here,
Yeah.
doon, doon, doon. And right away, it completely transformed that tune into this other thing that
Hmm.
was a perfect vehicle for that melody and whatever. And for me, it was like, oh man, it's really stupid to make the record first and then go play some gigs. So like when we did this Return of the Brecker Brothers thing with Randy and Ada, his wife is playing saxophone,
Oh yeah.
Mike Stern, Dave Weckl, and Will Lee, and me. I kind of set it up so that we did a week at the Blue Note first, and everybody knows the pieces. They kind of have some good ideas on where things can go, and then we made the record after that, and it was just a total piece of cake. It's amazing how
Mm.
stupid it is to play the tunes in the studio with everybody reading first, and
Mhm.
then you go out and it's like, oh man, I wish we had done that on the record.
Sure. Well, I think that there a lot of times there used to be a thing, and maybe there still is when we can tour again. Not me, but you and others. Of do the record and then do a tour to promote the record. But
Yeah, and that's
these days, I don't know if that's worth it, because who buys a CD anymore? You just
yeah,
stream it or
it's
download it.
really
You know.
it's on its head from that because you actually do sell some CDs at the gig, but it's
Yeah.
more like the CD is an advertisement for the tour you're going to do. People hear the music, they
Right.
stream it on Spotify or whatever, and we all get those statements that say we've made 0.0017 cents this quarter. But it gives people an idea of what they're listening to. I
Yeah.
guess it kind of establishes that you're legitimate or something if you have a record out.
Hmm.
Um, I made a record with my trio, Third Rail, Yannick Guizdala and Tom Breckline,
Oh yeah.
and it started out. We had this great agent, Lucia Feck, in Germany, who just really liked this, and she, kind of, it was her idea really, and I brought over an interface and figured out how to mic up the drums so that we could make a good recording of us playing live, and I would mix up this thing, and I had a couple little video cameras because I wanted to be able to start putting out YouTubes like after the first gig so that we could then promote them on Facebook and stuff to attract people to the next gigs.
Right.
Um, and I ended up just recording every tune on every show and just kind of making a CD out of what we thought were the best performances of of each tune. That's another way to make yourself a
Sure.
record without doing any recording at all. So
Yeah. It's funny. Speaking of Spotify, I uh, I saw Frank Bali was talking about Spotify. He refers to Spotify as Mr. Spotify. Decided to make music free for the world. And that's why
yeah.
none of us have money. So please buy our
Well, now it's
CDs.
not free.
Well,
We're making
Right,
a penny or
exactly.
two every quarter.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, the problem with Spotify is that it has replaced people buying the music. And Apple Music, you know, you have the family subscription or whatever. And now you don't have to pay anybody, you know, a net of $7 to own their music anymore.
Mhm.
If it was purely a substitute for radio airplay, um, I never made that much music on, or made that much money on radio airplay, because the stuff that I wrote didn't get played enough on big enough stations that it made the ASCAP survey. So, you know, a
Oh,
check for $30 from Spotify or something like that was like, okay, well, it's better than nothing.
interesting. Brian, are you listening to this? We did a couple CDs together, and I really like the last one we did about 10 years ago.
Hmm.
I think Jimmy Haslett produced it. And I say this with all respect to the members of the band and all that. There was this goal of getting the distribution and the radio play and all that kind of stuff and the ASCAP and all that. And the bottom line is nobody ever saw a red cent because I didn't realize you had to make that survey. Now it
Right.
makes sense. Yeah. So no dinero, but you know, a great experience though at the same time.
Well, and now, you know, you make that millionth of a cent per play or whatever it is. Um, if you can work it the right way, I know people who make pretty good money on Spotify making music that's very targeted to something. Like, if you can believe it, one popular genre there is music for your pet to listen to while you're out.
No way.
And, you know, so it's on this playlist, and people are like, oh, you know, whatever, Buster likes to listen to this music. And they put it on, and it gets several plays a day just from that person when they're out
Wow.
of the house.
Interesting. So that
Yeah.
now that's a category that I wouldn't ever think anyone would have thought of because I never would have thought of thinking of it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, welcome to the new world of music.
Yeah. So I put out a CD last year, and I'm not here to talk about me, but it's for a foundation I have, and I do a lot of work with people with movement disorders, Parkinson's in particular, for
Hmm.
movement rehab, cognitive and memory rehab, retraining the brain, and all this stuff. So basically, any proceeds we get go to the 501c3 I started, and then we, help people who need help and who have no help. A lot of it goes outside the country because some of them are hurting so bad. But I did that thing where I ordered 1,000 CDs because it only costs about $200
Oh
than
God.
500 CDs.
Yeah,
This is a
sure.
this is a year ago. You know how many CDs I have left? 500 CDs.
997.
Jamie Haslett bought 125 of them, or 120. Scott Kinsey, who also plays on it, he bought 100, 125. So that got me down
Note
to
to
like,
self, get in touch with Jimmy Haslip immediately after interview. And Kinsey
but,
too.
you sell them for cost, and that's fine. These guys put in so much work on this thing. They were
Mhm.
so great to work with as always. And I figured out a CD now is kind of like a business card for at least for
That's
me. It's
right.
like
It's a
here,
promotional.
here's this. I'm going to give it to you, even though it costs a lot of money to make. You can have this.
Right. Now, please hire me to play at something. The way Randy puts it when he makes a record, classic Randy line. Well, I hope this turns out to be a million seller and not a million in my cellar.
Yeah, hey, I've heard that one before.
When
That's
we did the third rail CD, Yannick, who's a great businessman, in addition to being an unbelievable bass
yeah,
player,
he's
said,
great. Yeah.
we were discussing how many I should have pressed up, and he says, "Man, you'll never get rid of 300 of these things." And I said, "Well, I'm going to go for 1,000. Like you say, it's only $300 more."
It is, yeah.
And you know, at this point, mostly we've sold them at the gigs and so forth, and people can buy downloads and stuff, but they don't even do that anymore because You just type it into, Apple Music or something and you can hear it.
Yeah, that and there's so many platforms I'm not aware of. I know you can listen to my CD. Oh, I shouldn't say where. You should buy it, folks. No, you go to YouTube, put in Carl Sterling Dream. Boom, 8 songs come up. There it is. You don't have to pay anything. Y- You know what? It's fine. It it served its purpose. It was a really cool experience because I've only recorded, I don't know, a couple dozen CDs in my life, none under my name, and it was just a great experience. And it's not
Yeah.
like I'm not, talking with musicians trying to. I hope you'll hire me, like you, or uh, Jimmy. This is I want to capture history. That's really what I want to do with these interviews. It's like Dom. Do you know Dom Famolaro? Dom.
No.
So Dom Famolaro has a really great interview series. You can check it out on YouTube. And he's had Vinny's gone in, Chick Corea. I don't think he's talked with Herbie yet, but I want to talk with you about Herbie, and just Dave Weckl. I mean, the list goes. Jack DeJohnette. The list goes on and on and on.
Mm-hmm.
Ron Carter, and he told me last week when we were talking. I interviewed him. It was so much fun. Said, and he articulated what my intention is better than I actually knew what I would have said if I said it. He said, "When I'm dead and gone, if somebody stumbles upon this and they learn something or it reaches them or touches them in some way that inspires them or helps them, I've done my job. I've accomplished my goal."
Right.
But there's a lot of history, man. We could talk for hours about so many things, and I again appreciate you taking time to join me. So
Sure.
with that, you also mentioned Michael Brecker and the Iwi. The last time I saw Michael was the no, wait a minute. No, I've seen him do the Iwi a few times. That's right. I saw him on a McCoy Tyner gig. There was no Iwi.
Right.
But then the last time I saw him was maybe a year before he passed. I'm not sure. It was with Herbie, Terry Lynn Carrington, Scott Kelly, and Roy Hargrove.
I saw that.
And
I
this
saw
was
that at SUNY Purchase, except it was Patitucci on bass.
oh wow, yeah.
What
So
a
I
rocket ship that thing was. Boy.
you're not kidding.
Yeah.
So Michael is I had known through Peter Erskine that Michael was not feeling well, not that good, but he played his butt off as always. And he played the Iwi that night, and this is with Herbie at Symphony Hall in Boston. So I wanted to use that kind of a segue into how did you connect with Herbie Hancock? Because it looks like you've done a lot with him.
Well, Mike connected me with Herbie like as sort of as a technician because Mike and I kind of made a bet in like 2002 or 2003, I think, that we could take all that 600 pounds of EWI and road racks and all these synthesizer modules and sampler things and stuff and get it to happen on a power book, like virtually using Logic and the Logic environment. And so I kind of said about it, and I already had some ideas of how we could do it. And one particular challenge was the big chord things that Mike used to do were done on Oberheim's Matrix 12, which had this rotator function. And Robbie Kilgore found a way to get that to like, you could play a melody line in and it would generate all these great harmonies underneath there. And getting that to happen using the little tools that are available in Logic's environment was really a thing. I'm working with another guy, a saxophonist named Dan Willis now, who's working on the same sort of thing. And every now and again, I open one of the macros in these the rotators that I made, and there's 1,000 objects in there, and they're all cabled together in this weird way. So, but Mike knew that I was pretty good at that stuff, and Herbie was looking to get more out of the physical keyboard thing and get more stuff happening, in a laptop.
Mm-hmm.
And Herbie's always been like early adopter technology guy. You know who else was actually was Oscar Peterson. A lot of people don't know, but Oscar was a heavy tech head.
I had no idea. But
Yeah.
I had a feeling Herbie was, because
Oh
for
yeah.
a
I
long
mean,
time I've seen a laptop or a Mac next to him, or two of them or something sometimes.
yeah. If it's cool technology, Herbie has to be one of the first. So, and so we took Mike's environment with Mike's blessing and kind of adapted it so that we could get a bunch of Herbie stuff running. This is before Main Stage was out or anything like that. And so I got to know him doing that, and it was always interesting. We would often start nominally at like 9 p.m., but not really start working on it till about midnight. We would be discussing other things, or there'd be an update to the OS and we'd download it, and now this wouldn't work, and we'd spend time. But we did that and got it working, and there were some interesting things that Herbie wanted to be able to do that I found a way to do it, but it was awkward. Like, he wanted to be able to go out in the audience. Herbie once told me a beautiful thing about who he is as a musician and a performer. And he got me into chanting Buddhism, the Nichiren Buddhism practice. And I asked him, he always chants before a concert, and so we did some stuff together, and I chanted with him. And I asked him, what do you chant for before these concerts? And he says, I chant that, like, the main thrust of it was that the audience have a good time and that he and the audience are one. Which is very different than, that I have a good gig or, anything like that. And so as an extension of that, he wanted to be able to go out into the audience with a microphone, have people in the audience make a noise or sing a syllable or something like that. And he wanted to be able to push a button and then be able to play it on the keyboard. Which is a hell of an interesting idea if you think about it. You could just, collect a few little syllables from people and then get a loop going or something that you generate right there out of the audience's input, and then, turn it into a tune. And I would love to hear what he did with it. But anyway, so we were doing that kind of on a technical thing. And one night at about 11 o'clock, we were sitting there and just out of the blue, Herbie has like a very free range roaming mind. You all get the impression that there's always like multiple streams going in there. And he says, I want to hear some stuff that you've done, that you've written, that's not jazz. And so I said, well, there's a whole page on my website, gwhitty.com, of film music that I've done. And it's pretty well developed film music. I wrote a lot of music for TV. I wrote a lot of music for films. There's some stuff in there from a couple feature films that I did. And so he said, well, let's hear it. And so we put it up. And then to my amazement, Herbie Hancock sat there for like an hour and a half and listened to all this stuff that I had written and arranged and produced. And like, he listened to them all the way through. There tend to be kind of like 3-minute cues. And at the end of that, he says, I think I might have a gig for you. And I said, well, I'm completely down. And he says, I got these things where Wayne Shorter and I did these duet concerts, like a series of them. And we'd like to have them orchestrated so that they could be, played with an orchestra. And I said, well, let's hear some of these. And, those two guys, for 60 years now, at that time it was like 50 years, but that's a long time for two of the great musical intellects in human history to be working together and reading each other's minds and cracking each other up with this idea or that idea or something like that. And so he played me some of the stuff that they did, and one of the things was a performance of Footprints. And you would never know it was Footprints until finally Wayne quotes the melody for about 2 bars, 6 minutes, 8 minutes into it. But it was just brilliant, and it's one of those things. Mike used to have it with Pat Metheny, where you just start playing and somehow you never manage to get crosswise with each other. Like you're both on such a high plane of musical existence. And in fact, at one point when we were listening to this stuff, I was just sitting there and it's like the guy in the old Maxell ad with, the music, he's got these speakers and his hair's pinned back
The
like
hair's
this.
back. Yeah.
And at one point I asked him, and I thought this was very revealing. I said, so did you and Wayne used to do this like at sound check when you were with Miles? And he says, oh no, we could never have done this back then. Which, I mean, think about how sophisticated that music was already back then.
Yeah.
And yet they have both like continued to evolve. And man, I'm telling you, Herbie and Chick Corea too
Yeah.
are both
Definitely.
still peaking. Like it's a scary representation of how long we could go and still be, at the top of our game.
That's actually really inspiring too. I was talking with a friend of mine, Gary. Gary Husband,
Oh yeah,
drummer and
yeah,
keyboard player too. So
of
we were talking
course.
about he just did a thing with Chick Corea recently, and they kind of explained how it went, which was very interesting. Um, but Chick is just at the top of his game, it seems, and Gary's always at the top of his too. But he was saying what working with. Have you worked with Chick at all, or?
Not yet. I had
Uh-huh.
a great conversation with him at a festival in Istanbul one time.
Mm-hmm.
And I would love to because that is probably magnetic north for me most. The records that really sucked me into being not a scuba diver but a jazz musician were, Romantic Warrior, that Chick
Oh,
record,
yeah.
Light as a Feather, you know, Crystal Silence, all those things that I heard when I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Me
just
too.
yeah, just insanely great. And, yeah. So maybe at some point our world will intersect at some point. I said something interesting to him though at this festival. It it was raining like hell, and the Turks were utterly undeterred by that. It was pouring on them, and they were out there dancing and totally grooving, and I just so loved that. We were under a cover. And then finally backstage after all these years, I was with Mike and Randy. I introduced myself. We had this little conversation, and I said, "So what's next for you?" And he says, "Well, I'm going to go stop doing the electric thing and just do a bunch of acoustic writing, and I'm writing this thing for a string quartet and whatever." And at some point I said, "So no more on the electric stuff?" And he says, "No." And I said, "Really? Why?" And he says, "I was just never really very good at it."
Jeez.
Which I thought, and I said, well, you got a generation of guys like me into it. You were that good at it. And he says the interesting thing, he says, I feel like, for Joe Zawinul, it's like that's really his first voice
Mm-hmm.
and Joe is pretty peerless at, just making everything sound like an organic extension of himself. And he said, but to me, it's really the acoustic piano. That's kind of home base for me.
Interesting.
And I
Wow.
thought that was a real interesting, he's like a person who seems like he's just very frank with himself like that.
Mm-hmm. So my mom is watching. Hi,
Uh-huh.
Her name's Helen. Hey, mom.
Hi, Mom.
It's about 6 years ago, maybe seven. We saw a chick at the community college up here with Carlos, Carlito,
Right.
that guy. I love that guy. And it was Roy Haynes, I think, grandson on drums.
Okay.
And the guy from England playing sax, tenor and soprano.
Right.
If I can't remember his name.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about, though.
And that was, I think, and mom, if you can comment if you want or text me. I think it was all acoustic. I don't think Chick played Rhodes or anything that night, but they were smoking, man. They only did
Right.
they did 4 tunes. It was
Right.
about 80 minutes, which I love. Right, I used to get pissed when that would happen. I want like five more. No, I had enough. I couldn't take in anymore.
Exactly.
and 3 of the tunes were in 3 and 1 was in 4.
Right.
And it was just a beautiful show. We had good seats right up close. It's a really small auditorium. I love that guy, man. So let's go back to Herbie. So I find this really interesting about Herbie, and I'm kind of curious about your insight with this. I was at a show at Eastman Theater for the Rochester Jazz Fest as Vinny, Tal,
Wilkenfeld, right?
yeah, and Phil Gaines,
Mm-hmm.
and
Right.
the guitar guy there. I
That was
always
after the Imagine tour, and Lionel Lewicki.
that you know what that was the Imagine tour, I think, because they were,
Right.
or he had just won Album of the Year or something like that.
That would have been for the River record.
Oh, okay, all
Yeah.
right. Yeah, it's very possible post COVID, my brain still isn't functioning quite right, uh, but I feel good. So, anyways, bottom line is they were playing this one tune for like 5 minutes, and it was really, really cool. Like, oh man, I've never heard this song before until I
But
hear about about a
exactly.
2 or 3 or 4 bar quote of Dolphin Dance. I'm like, no way. How could he?
See, and
How could
that's
he?
what happens.
How could he possibly even think to play it like this? I mean, how can anyone? So when you talk about what's going on in Herbie's head, the multiple streams, I
Well,
can't
the
even
weird thing
imagine. I
about
can't even.
that is that it's actually going on in everybody's head in that band.
Yeah, that's true.
Um, you know, to get back to just finish up this story. So Herbie gave me those tapes of him and Wayne. I did these orchestrations. They loved it.
Yeah.
We booked some dates to do one of them or two of them, I think, with some orchestras. The first orchestra, who shall remain nameless, couldn't play a groove really, but
Okay.
the second one was the Oregon Symphony, and Herbie said that one was great. Uh, I learned some things about arranging for situations like that if you don't have Vinny in the middle of the band. And then what was the next step? The next step was that Herbie was working with Lang Lang, great classical pianist from China,
Hmm.
and they wanted to do uh, a duet record, and Clive Davis was the producer on it, and they wanted to do some of it was going to be some tunes from West Side Story. And it was going to be the LA Phil and them, or some, I think it was the Phil. And so Herbie asked me to do some arranging for that. So I did some, and it was really great and really fun. They're on my website, clips of all this stuff, all the
Yeah.
orchestra stuff I've done for Herbie. And then I waited and waited to hear if it was going to come together or not. And I think Lang Lang was not comfortable playing like a groove thing like that,
Hmm.
was what I heard happened to it. Because if you're doing America or tunes like that, they're pretty groovy tunes. And I
Yeah.
had percussionists, Latin percussion in there that was actually playing a groove. And I had written some classical piano parts that I thought that sounded like classical piano parts, but I don't think they were up to the level that he's used to playing.
Hmm.
So that got shelved, and then Herbie wanted me to do some things for the LA Phil's 100th anniversary concert at the Hollywood Bowl. And so I did I did 3 tunes for that, like arranged them for the LA Phil. And then early last year, we did more tunes for a concert uh, featuring Angela Davis. It was a part of something called the Power to the People series.
Hmm.
And Herbie had written 2 pieces. He wrote one called Ostinato for Angela Davis, like in 1970. It was like, I think with Mwandishi was when he was doing this. And he also wrote one called I Have a Dream. And these are from way back when, kind of
Oh
in
wow.
in the era where he was doing, it was after Speak Like a Child in those records, but some of the writing was similar.
Hmm.
And Ostinato was just like a 2-bar ostinato in 15. Um, and so, you know, like I made a little commitment that I was going to keep it going, because all the way through the original, which is, you know, those guys just taking that thing and taking it to all these different dimensions over the course
Mm-hmm.
of like a good 8 or 10 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so we did. You know, I started out with it in the bass, and then, you know, it surfaces in the woodwinds later and stuff like that. But if you go to see Herbie's band, because they played those pieces, it took like 25 minutes, and then Herbie's band played for like 45 minutes to an hour,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just like a stream of consciousness thing, where
Yeah.
it just flows from one piece to the next. And at no point do I remember them stopping and Herbie saying, "Okay, thank you. Now we'd like to play." You know, it just goes, and it's such a high end band. All the guys in there are such great listeners. Um,
Yeah.
you know, the way that Genus arranges from the bass chair,
Yeah.
the way that Terrace Martin is in there, you know, adding a full fourth dimension to everything without getting in the way of Herbie, who's going to lay in all this brand new, beautiful harmony.
Mm-hmm.
And Lionel on guitar is, you know, it's just a beautiful thing to hear. But like you say, often you don't know what they're playing until it's done and they play the last eight out. And then they're into the next thing that you don't know what it is. But
Yeah.
it really changed my opinion of what, you know, I've seen several of these now, but of what a live show should be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, why stop? It's almost like there's a toll booth every time the tune stops and you say, "Okay, now, you know, I haven't adapted to this new world myself yet either, but just get rid of the toll booths."
You know, I saw a weather report a few times. They did that. They just went on and they didn't. There was, I think the times I saw them, maybe Wayne said one or two sentences. At the
Mhm.
end, Joe might have said something.
Right.
It was music the whole time. They went. It was seamless. It just kept going and going and going. And
Right.
one soon you recognize it. Then there's some interlude, and then boom. Herbie did that on the tour when I saw him at Eastman. It just blew my mind though that finally I recognized Dolphin Dance, and then that actually that went away, and I just couldn't like figure it
Or
out.
did it?
Well, no, it probably didn't, but it went away for me because I'm not at the level where I
Right.
can, and I'm generally, I mean, nowhere near your guys' level, but I'm generally pretty good at picking stuff out.
Yeah.
No way. Now, if I recorded it and listened back like 20 times, I'd probably understand, but that they're in the you guys are all in the you're in the passing lane. I love that. There's something I wanted to ask you here. Let's see. I got some notes. Oh, Jeff Richmond. You know Jeff.
Of course.
Jeff, so just a really quick story. Jimmy Haslip called me about 3 years ago and said, Carl, I have a friend who needs help. He knows I work with people with movement disorders. And it's okay to say this now because it's okay to say it public, Jeff said. He lives with Parkinson's. So he was having a tremor that was affecting his picking hand.
Mhm.
So we have some things we can do to help with that to diminish tremor or eliminate it long enough that maybe you can at least do a few tunes or a set or something, and then take a
Right.
break and do this vibration therapy and all that, and then go back and do it. And it seemed to help, and a bunch of other things that he was working on. So I started working with him, doing things, and I had to teach in Los Angeles the workshop that I created and traveled around the world and taught in a lot of places. So long story short, he says, "Oh, dude, man, we got a jam when you get out here." He lives up in Granada Hills,
Mhm.
near. I'm sure you've probably been to Paul Taverner's place, right? Big City Recording Studios. Have you been up there? That's
Not
Granada
that
Hills
I
too.
remember.
So, anyways, I said, no, I haven't played like a gig in like 5 years. It would be horrible. You don't want to work with me in any way, shape. He said, no, I do. There's a studio down the road, and we're going to go there, and we'll just record some things and see if we like anything. Like, no, I don't think so. But I'll gladly like hang out and eat Thai food and stuff. So,
Right.
so, so anyway, I got thinking about it, and I called them back a few days later. Like, wait, maybe we can make a project. We'll do it for my foundation. So actually, Jimmy came in as a producer with Scott Kinsey, and of course Scott's reharms and everything, and just wild. I love it.
Right.
Beautiful. Jeff wrote some beautiful stuff. We used to play one of his songs on there, and his solos are great. And Erskine came in to donate his time and talent because I've known him for what's going to be 50 years. So we met when we were very young.
Wow.
I was 11, he was 18. Mom was there. Remember that night, Mom, at the Castaways, Stan Ketten's band? And then we just, had a friendship ever since. So, anyways, he came in. Novak came in and played a couple tunes. We had a blast. And Brandon Fields and Bob Reynolds played one song each. So I really am very, very happy with this CD. It did what we wanted it to. But the bottom line is, I want to say we have a friend in common. And besides Jimmy, well, Jeff Richman.
Yeah.
What a great guy, man.
Yeah, what a great guy. And he was somebody that kind of, when I moved to LA, I really didn't know hardly anybody. But I get this call from Jeff, and it's like the Baked Potato All Stars. Do you want to do it? And he always had this great band and his great writing and playing, and
Yeah.
so it's like, shit, yes, I'm there. And we did a whole bunch of gigs like that really helped kind of get me out and like meet some people in LA, because it's a different scene than the New York scene was. Just it's a different group of people that you work with, and so
yeah, he's really good like that too, and he's written some beautiful things. Do you mind if I move forward and ask you about you worked with Chaka Khan?
Yeah.
What have you done with her exactly? Did you do any live? You do with some touring with her?
No, she knew this very good friend of mine, Gary Haas, who's a great bass player and a really great producer, like very high vision sort of producer. And she was making a record that became The Woman I Am. And, she was a friend of Gary's. And Gary played, I think Gary replaced Anthony Jackson in her band.
I didn't know.
And Gary has some funny stories about being on the road with Chaka. And she gave him this tune called Be My Eyes. And Gary and I had been doing this really great kind of funk R&B band up in Connecticut with a real rotating cast of great musicians, but everybody in it was great. And Gary liked to play bass in it, and he knew that I was pretty adept with the sequencer already. And this was, I think I did it on Creator 1.3, running on an Atari ST. But we did it, and we kind of put everything we could think of, like the whole kitchen sink, every lick we could think of on a Moog bass line and stuff like that, and I programmed drums on it. And she liked it, and so she gave us another one to do, Love with No Strings. And Anthony Jackson played bass on that. Anthony was one of Gary's heroes, of course. And Anthony had this vision for it where he was going to play the bass line, and then he was going to double it all an octave up, and then we would run it through a flanger. And I remember it took 8 hours to do the bass part on this thing. You wouldn't know it to hear it, but Anthony's a perfectionist. And I remember Anthony saying at a certain point, we had a rough vocal of Chaka on it at that point, and he says, "I'm sorry, but whenever I hear this, I don't hear Love with No Strings. I hear her singing Love with No Stain."
Oh wow, man!
And you're like, "Oh boy, what should we do? Should we add some 8K so that we can hear the S better?"
Yeah.
And then she came in and sang it, and she is a real unusual talent and person. She's, besides being just an insanely great singer, she just made mincemeat of this thing. She sang it so quick and so perfectly, and she harmonized herself just like boom boom, pretty much as fast as you can hit the record button again. She's in there.
Wow.
But her thing with everything. I kind of figured this out from hanging out with her later, which lasted until like 7 in the morning. She's kind of the Iron Lady. Like she's a huge Joni Mitchell fan, and she likes to sing a Joni tune at a lot of her concerts. And she was working on a Joni record a while back too. But the lyric has to make sense to her. It has to mean something to her, or she's just not really interested in the song, you know. So she's like a real sort of an interpreter, and like a ferocious, busy intellect is the impression that I got from her. Is that she's, you know, an artist in way more than the fact that she's one of the handful of greatest singers ever.
Sure.
So that was great. And then, you know, we went out for many, many, many drinks after. I remember we went to this place called Mondo Perso, and she was out there, and like she took some sugar packets and started playing, you know, like percussion with these sugar packets and stuff. And it was really fun, and, you know, great to work with one of my icons, you know, since I was in junior high school practically.
I love her, man. Only saw her
Yeah,
once.
and you know, she's very few people with that powerful a voice have such a light, deft touch when they sing jazz. You know?
Yeah. It was a
So,
really nice concert of her singing a lot of, I think, standards. It's jazz. Vinny's on drums. I don't know the rest of the band, but I mean, I probably do if I look, but I just can't remember who it is now. But you know, I've heard reports from people about her versatility, talent, and other things I won't say. Just fun.
right.
Jimmy told me some stories years ago that I just like it. It's so funny, but I can't. I'm not allowed to say anything. But but
You know, one
speaking of
thing that
that,
I'll say is that when Whitney Houston passed away, somehow Chaka ended up on a couple news programs being interviewed, sort of about Whitney and about, you know, the music business and stuff like that. And she really looked and sounded great. You know, I mean, she's had struggles that a lot of people at her level have, and so just to me, the anytime I see her and she's like really on point, because when she's on point, she's on point like nobody else. I it's like go, you know, because just a formidable talent.
I went to see her with Rufus, and it would
Mm-hmm.
be the fall of '79, I think, and J.R. Robinson was drumming.
Right.
I don't know who else was in the band. I'm pretty sure they had 2 keyboard players. Not that it matters, but of course, Once You Get Started was a recent hit at that time, and so they did that tune, and they did what's that one? I can't remember. Da, 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 Tell Me Something Good.
Right.
They did that one, and I mean the band was on fire, and she was on fire. It
Do you
was
have
just incredible.
Stomping at the Savoy? A two record live set. I can whistle you every single note on it because I've listened to it 500 times, and it's that band. You know, Tony Maiden and Hawk Walensky and JR, and I think it's the Tower of Power horns on it, but I'm not sure. I think they may have overdubbed those. But man, you know, for me, the live versions of all those tunes are way better, as great as the studio recordings were, but the live versions are just crazy. They're so great and so locked in, and it just flows so beautifully. So there was, on the original set, there was 3 sides of the live concert, and then another side that had save your dreams like the sky above. Don't Go to Strangers, that beautiful ballad.
Yeah, I
And then it
love that.
also had Ain't Nobody. It was like the original, I think, appearance of
Oh yeah.
that great track. But
Mhm.
yeah, I get that, because it'll take you right back to then. It was probably that tour.
I've got to check that out, because that's another thing that I find very, very often is the live version of something is just, it's got
And
this edge
again,
to it. There's smoking. There's an edge to it. There's the life of it. Because
yeah, and this thing,
it's
it's
live.
beautifully mixed, and just, geez, everybody's at the peak of their, game. Ernie Watts is on it.
Oh my god.
Really a cool record. One of my 2 or 3 favorite live records
So
ever.
Stomping at the Savoy.
That's what it's called.
Got to get that. I've got to find that.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to go on a little tangent here and say, folks, do what you need to do, and it's fine. But I'm going to buy that.
Oh my God.
I buy music. I don't like to give Mr.
Okay,
Spotify
boomer.
money. Yeah, right. Totally.
Isn't that what we say nowadays when
I think
somebody's
it might
picking
be.
it old school and actually paying for their music?
Yeah, there's some beautiful music out there, and I'm an advocate. Buy the damn stuff, because
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, but $10 for a download for 12 songs or 8 songs, just buy it.
Yeah.
Just buy it. I don't subscribe to any music services. I'm not saying if you do, you're wrong. It's nothing. It's not about that. You have to do what's right for you. But especially now, though, I was talking with Scott Kinsey recently, and he was saying, well, I mean, we got a pandemic, man, and a lot of people, if they aren't as adept in doing, production, writing, composing, sessions, they don't have, if they're not doing stuff, playing their parts and sending files over and being involved in things. There's some hurting musicians right now who are some of the most beautiful and talented musicians ever, who have given all this beautiful music over the years. Buy the CDs.
Absolutely.
It's a pandemic. I mean, if you can't buy them, you can't. Some people are unemployed. There's a lot of unemployment, but buy it. If you can buy it, buy it.
One thing, I got the Apple Music plan. I have 2 kids, one is 17 and one is 14.
Mhm.
And one thing that's kind of cool about it is that they can just totally go exploring. If there's anything that interests them, they download it, and they listen to it. I mean, like, my son, both of them are kind of classic rock people for the most part. But the other day I heard some Sly and the Family Stone coming out of my son Ryan's room.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, so there is that aspect of it too, where
That's true. Yeah.
yeah, people, like even my own self, I think people find my stuff through this weird networking thing that you do. If you like this, you might like this also.
Yeah.
But then figuring out how you're going to make a living when what used to be one of your income streams is now, like you say, just a calling card.
Yeah.
There's an art to that. And we're all still trying to figure it out,
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you pointed that out, though, because and I almost feel bad in a way, because I don't ever want to offend anybody, like, oh, you shouldn't do Spotify. It's not about that. I've used YouTube, has been my go-to for searching for things. Then if I like it, I buy it. Which it used to be I'd buy stuff, and if I didn't like it, it just went on the shelf and I never listened to it. Or I'd pull it out 5
Yeah, I
years
mean,
later because I understood it 5 years later. But still, the ability to find things, that is a benefit. I agree.
and YouTube can be a rabbit hole in a good way too. I was watching something, and the next video up was a Chet Baker thing.
Mhm.
And I listened to Chet and transcribed Chet when I was at Berkeley. I had a thing for trumpet players. I probably transcribed more Freddie Hubbard than any other musician. 'Cause I was just fascinated by the way same thing that appealed to me about Chick Corea's lines.
Mhm.
And so, I watched that Chet, and then the next thing was another Chet, but like, in 1980, right before he passed away. And he's singing and he's playing his ass off, and he's got a mouthful of dentures, and he's playing the trumpet like that.
Yeah.
So then I got on Wikipedia and like, man, I gotta like catch up on my Chet.
Mhm.
And I ended up listening to a whole bunch of Chet Baker music that I hadn't ever heard before. That's, amazing. And
Yeah.
so, as a way to discover new things, there's something about their algorithm that works.
Yeah, it
Like
does.
yeah, you do find some stuff that you might not otherwise have been aware of.
Yes. Yeah, that's definitely an advantage. Um, so let me let me ask you this. What are you working on right now? What projects do you have in the works?
Well, right now I'm working on a bunch of, I do a lot of teaching. I teach online at artistworks.com, which is like
Hmm.
a subscription-based thing where Peter Erskine teaches drums there, Patitucci teaches bass, Eric
Hmm.
Marienthal teaches saxophone. It's a really great system. We all filmed like a couple hundred, 6 or 7 minute lessons starting at the very beginning of things. And then the students can submit what's called a video exchange, a little movie of them playing, and we respond with a little movie of us playing.
Hmm.
Mine have gotten to where I'm such a gas bag that, they're like 12 or 14 minutes long. The idea is that it's 3 or 4 minutes, just, cut to the chase, kind of cue the student in and whatever. But I can't stop myself from showing all the dimensions of whatever they're working on that I can think of. And then I also teach via Skype. So that's a lot of what I'm doing. I'm working on a CD for a guitar player in Italy named Luca Di Luzio,
Hmm.
and that'll have Rodney Holmes on drums. And Alain Caron is going to play bass. Randy Brecker is going to play trumpet. And we're just starting to do the production. And, so I do everything in the machine first, just so that we can mess with the form of it, figure out what the solo changes could be, so that we can hear it and assess it. But then we take that, and in an ideal world, we would just go play as a band in the studio. But since the COVID thing is still with us, we're probably just everybody will replace all those parts. And I always tell people, if you listen to this at all, either listen to it without your track and give me your fresh thing, or else only listen once just to get a basic idea of what Luke and I came up with
Yeah.
as like, a roadmap and a form on things.
Hmm.
I do a lot of mastering. I'm mastering a record for Dave Weckl.
Oh,
Um,
great.
yeah, gee, what else is there? There's a record by a bass player named Leo Traversa, great bass player in New York City that's worked with kind of everybody over the years.
Hmm.
Finally made his own record, and I'm going to mix that probably in the next 2 or 3 months. Playing a lot of kind of one-off keyboard tracks for this or that. Everybody wants you to videotape it now, which is kind of cool. And then they put it on YouTube.
Hmm. Hmm.
But it means that you got to sort of play a good solo in one take, and a lot of
Yeah,
this
right.
material is not that easy.
Yeah.
And then road-wise, I was supposed to go on the road with Frank Gambale's band, which
Hmm.
is a pretty ass-kicking little unit. It's Frank on guitar, uh, Gergo Borlai is playing drums, and me and Hadrian Farode.
Oh,
Uh,
geez.
yeah, and we've done a couple hits, and it's pretty mercurial, And I always laugh that like Frank and we got a lot of chops, but our concern is keeping up with Hadrian
Well,
on the
that guy
soloing.
is just that guy's insane, man. I mean,
He's
he's just
insane.
I love it.
Yeah, and one of the weird things about Hadrian is that he doesn't read, and he just doesn't need to. You can show him something really difficult, like the end of African Skies,
Hmm.
a couple times, and it's like, okay. I think he does gigs like he puts it on in the car on the way to the gig, and it's
Yeah.
just in there.
Jeez, man.
But that tour was supposed to happen in March of last year, then it got postponed to March of this year, and now it's postponed to March of 2022.
Yeah,
So, but it looks like it will happen then.
is that going to be in the States?
No, it's all in Europe. It's almost always in Europe. People in Europe
Yeah, I
are
know.
are willing to pay some money and come out. And I used to think that it was just that the television culture hadn't pervaded Europe as much, and I still think that's true. Uh, but Europe and Russia is a great audience. If you can get some gigs in Russia, man, that's an in-tune audience for you.
Yeah. Hmm.
And we're working on getting some stuff together in Japan. All of this is sort of pending the COVID thing ending. I was supposed to go
Yeah.
to Spain for some concerts with Eric Marienthal and Randy last November, and of course that just wasn't possible.
Yeah.
So we'll see if that happens this year in November. So
Yeah. I I saw Gambali about a year and a half ago with Sean Wayland on keys,
mhm.
Dennis and Mike Pope, and
Yeah,
I that was their hit. That was his first ever American tour. He said, "I've been all over the world. You could throw a dart and land
right,
anywhere on the map, and I've probably been there 5 times,
right,
but not with my own band." And
yeah,
so that's why I asked if it's going to be in the States, because I'd love to watch. First of all, I love how he plays, and he writes some cool stuff. But I love to
yeah.
watch him play too.
Oh yeah.
He's fun to watch.
Well, and it's fun to watch the rest of us play some of that music because some of it like required me to learn some new keyboard chops. There's a lot of stuff in there like that for Frank it's just like some sweet picking thing like this.
Uh,
But for the piano player, you better have two hands, kind of going like that. But it's really fun music to play, and it's always really good harmony.
yeah,
I think that's something about Frank that flies a little bit under the radar against all the other dazzling stuff that he's so great at. But he also has his wife Boca is a really great singer, and they have a very cool kind of a more pop-oriented book of vocal tunes and all that stuff too. It's very
yeah.
sophisticated, on the harmonic front. So
That's I forgot about I forgot about her. I mean, I had read about her and seen pictures of them together and heard something that they did. Sounded really nice.
yeah, it's called Soul Mine, and those were the first
Yeah.
gigs that I did with Frank.
Okay.
I was in China with Chris Mingdoki's band,
Hmm.
and Frank was over there kind of doing the same circuit, but the next night, and to save a little dough, and he'd been curious about playing with me, so we did that, and that was cool. But
That's
yeah,
great.
yeah,
That is really cool. I was just thinking, this is off track. I'll say it because Mike Pope and I were talking after that gig because we've been communicating about a bunch of this type of stuff. This is my new, well, a year ago, a new favorite textbook, if you will.
yeah.
And
Wow.
this book, I have to tell you now, this is not like your typical traditional music therapy dialogue. This goes into the science of how the brain changes. And this is what I do in my work. I'm trying to
Uh,
find ways to help people to move better, improve cognition, improve memory. Um, and there's a lady watching right now, Lori Mishley. Dr. Mishley is an amazing uh in her work with the Parkinson's population. Hi, Lori. We got to get on the phone sometime. But anyways, this book here, the Handbook of Neurologic Music Therapy, is really great. So Mike and I were talking about that and some other stuff, and then he was telling me we were talking about his experience with Chick Corea and Frank Gambale, and they were talking about, I think it's the tune "Got a Match," dun,
right.
dun, 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 dun. And he says one night that was so smoking fast. He says he's just in the middle. He's standing between Chick and Frank. And he said, I just can't believe what I'm hearing. I'm just trying to,
Yeah.
it's like, I keep up with these guys. I can't imagine that feeling. Probably like, things you go through, like working with Herbie, working with Michael, all these things. And your first initial introduction to working with them, it just has to be really cool. Has to be.
You know what the weird thing is too is that the more of that you do and the more you kind of cross those thresholds, there's a great book out there called The Way of the Superior Man, and
Oh,
it sounds like it's not what it is. It's basically like a kind of a guidebook to ways of thinking about your life, and in there the guy says that you know a man should be most comfortable, and it applies to women too, like living just beyond his edge.
Hmm.
And I have found that all the stuff that I've done, and some of it was damned uncomfortable, man. You know, people that I've worked with that, embarrassed me on stage and stuff like that. But the more that you do, and the more stuff that, yeah, there you go, that's it. Cool book. The more stuff that you do that gets you over your edge, or out over your skis, as they would say,
Hmm.
the more I find that I just am relaxed, and I'm relaxed in my playing.
Hmm.
And when I sit down at the piano, I often talk about it with my students in the context that most people seem like they're born rushing. They play ahead of the beat, and I've tried to psychoanalyze why, and I think some of it is that there's this sensation in him that's like, oh shit, I'm improvising. I don't know what notes I'm playing. I don't know what this is, and I want it to be over. So
Hmm.
if I rush, if I play ahead of the beat, I'll get finished like a fraction of a second earlier, or something. There's some
Hmm.
reason. Um, but as I get older, and as I do more musical experiences, even if they're, you know, really weird, like learn a harsh lesson kinds of things, but it doesn't happen that much anymore. But it sure happened in 2018 with this one tour I did. I find that I play less. I'm comfortable playing less. I want to play less. And the shit that I play is writer.
I get it.
Chris Mingdoki's band is a good example of that. We played together for like 12 years. Dave Weckl, Dean Brown, Ming,
Hmm.
and me.
Yeah.
And that's a band of pretty good producer heads.
Yeah.
And like the way that we ended up kind of orchestrating that was like it was like to try to frame as much air as we could in the coolest way that we could, rather than to fill everything with notes. I mean, Dean is such an incredible orchestrator from the guitar, and such a great stirrer of the pot. He'll throw all kinds of weird things out there that kind of poke it in a different way. And Dave, of course, has produced dozens of CDs, if not hundreds at this point. And
Yeah.
and Ming is like the perfect economical listener, too, and it makes me want to play less, listen more, I guess. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's kind of a cool place to arrive at.
I can relate to that partially from my last couple years playing music. Now, when I reemerge, though, it'll be different. The intention's
We'll
different.
play more notes when we reemerge.
Uh, well, no, I'm actually working on a little project with Bobby Thomas Jr. in
Yeah,
Philly. I love that guy. He's
yeah,
just the
sure.
sweetest guy, the sweetest guy. And between the teaching that he does there and the work that I do, it's gonna be more of a different type of musical expression and project. And we don't know the direction yet, but maybe one day we'll do a live gig, but we'll do it otherwise. It's not even about gigging, really. It's certainly not touring. But when I reemerge, I think I had a really good lesson from a saxophone player. Most of the greatest lessons I ever had as a drummer were from non-drummers. Although Peter taught me a lot of stuff. I never had a sit-down drum lesson. I had the discussions lesson about the
Right.
importance of space between notes, and that came back like in the late 70s. He was with a weather report, and we were on the phone. He politely, in his gentlemanly way, lectured me about space. Uh, it is very succinct. It only took like a minute,
Right.
2 minutes, and then we talked about other stuff. But I got a really good idea of the importance of space from him first, because otherwise,
He's a
and
master at that, boy.
oh yeah, and no disrespect to anybody, but I just wanted to be like the Billy Cobham of Mahavishnu, like, but that was appropriate for Mahavishnu. That
Have
was
you ever
appropriate.
heard a cut called Einbahnstraße?
From where?
It's Ron Carter's record, and it's Ron and Herbie and Billy just swinging out, just tipping
Ah,
on the drums, and
yeah.
it's the coolest, swingingest, just trio performance. And Herbie, is Herbie, but it's well worth listening to that because it's Billy like you've never heard him, at least like I've never heard him.
I'll have to check it out. I've seen and heard things that Billy does that was, the polar opposite of Mahavishnu, of course. Is he's very, very versatile.
Yeah,
And then even when I saw him with one of his bands in Rochester, probably 15 years ago, there was some flashy stuff. There was a lot of grooving, just
Dean Brown
grooving.
was probably in that band. Yeah,
Yeah, and so the I guess the idea is it's part of maybe just maturity, getting older and more mature is really probably the better word for it, and understanding. I actually, you mentioned did you say a gas bag? I mean I'm a wind bag. I can talk. I'm trying to
right.
find my words. I've written one book, and I don't have any copies here. I actually ran out, so I hope to get them soon. But you know, I like the book, but I could say now in half of the words I used in that book.
Exactly.
Yeah, it could have been half as much to read with actually more information.
Right.
Similar to playing,
Yeah.
speaking, articulating. I've been doing interviews and I'm trying not to go off on these tangents and just stream of consciousness like ramble.
Right.
Intention is that's what I want to say. In my ADHD kicked in. Dave Castiglione is a good friend. He actually worked quite a bit with Dave Matthews Band, 2006 to 2009 or something, saxophone. But anyways, we were just doing a tenor sax and drum jam many times. He taught me about intention. Put something behind it, brother.
Right.
You're just playing notes. That was a great lesson.
Yeah. I learned more from Jerry Bergonzi, the
Oh,
saxophonist,
God, I love that
than
guy.
I learned from any other single teacher. The basis of what I do today and what I teach today actually came from Jerry.
Is he still at? He's Berkeley, right? Was he teaching
No,
at
I
Berkeley?
don't think he was ever at Berkeley. No, he was teaching privately. He was $20 for a half hour. And
Is
he
he?
and Charlie Bonacas kind of grew up together. And a lot of the stuff that is sort of Charlie Bonacas's world, which is actually amazingly similar to Barry Harris's world. And Barry has
Oh
these
yeah.
really funny YouTube videos where he's talking about, and he pulls no punches, but he's right. But I got it from Jerry. Yeah. So you can take lessons. Tommy Igo put something on his Facebook page just 2 or 3 days ago, suggesting that drummers, take a lesson on a different instrument.
I love that guy. Tommy and I have spoken a few times, and I tell you, man, he tells it like it is too. I mean that respectfully, Tommy. If you see this, uh, we really we had to talk about the mindset for success, and man, he just laid it out beautifully. It was very succinct.
Yeah. Uh, there was something else I was gonna say that Tommy mentioned that I thought was an interesting insight. Um, oh yeah, that at USC in the jazz department there, you're required to take drums for a semester.
Yeah, I heard about that. I think Peter told me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a great idea.
yeah. So I got to go back to Bergonzi. Is he a New York, Boston?
Boston.
He is Boston.
Yeah.
Am I thinking of George Garzone? I'm thinking of a sax player.
Yeah, Garzone, and I mean, they had a band the whole time I was at Berkeley. They had a band called Gargons. And I and my friend Alan Jones, who's a great drummer in Portland, would ride our bicycles to Somerville, like this really long, I
Oh,
think it was like 6 miles or something from Berkeley to
yeah.
the Willow in Somerville, just so we could hear those guys play. Bob Galati and
Oh God, yeah.
yeah,
Bob passed away a year or two ago, I guess.
right,
Yeah.
and Bruce Gertz, and no
Oh,
piano. Sometimes they had Jeff
oh,
Covell play piano.
Bruce Gertz on bass, right?
Yeah,
I saw. So they were playing forever at, I don't know if they still were before COVID, at the Lily Pad on
right,
Cambridge,
right.
the Fringe on Monday nights.
The fringitization of Apguga. Rich Appleman was the bass player back then,
Okay.
and Bob Galati and Garzone.
I tell you, man. I actually have a recording of one of those nights from my little, I bootleg that one.
Absolutely.
And there that night, and I don't mean to like keep you too long here. You've been so generous with your time. It is fun to talk about these things, but
Yeah.
there was a piano tipped on its side against the wall. I think it was the guts of the piano. And George walks over and he takes like a spoon or a knife or something. He just starts ring.
Right.
And then he goes into a typical, like, he blows a tritone,
Right.
starts off the night. And then Bob Galati, what a nice guy, a great teacher. He had this really funky drum set. I don't know the brand, but man, he played beautifully and they sounded so good. That was a really special few times I got to see those guys. Just maybe 10, 12 years ago, a few
That
times.
story reminds me of the gigs that I saw with Bob Moses on them.
Oh wow.
Because Moses will force you out of your box, boy. He's going to do something,
Yeah.
really unusual and usually pretty cool. Like he'll walk out in front of the drum set and he's like chanting and playing with his hands and stuff like that. But if there was any object in there that went ding or click or, bling or whatever it would
Mhm.
be, he would be on it.
It's interesting. Do you know Sergio Bellotti?
I know the name.
Yeah, he teaches at Berkeley. He's drums. Also, he's multi-talented. He was talking about, I think he might have taken lessons with Bob Moses. Similar kind of story.
Hmm.
You're forced out of the box. And I never did kind of address the rest of it. Is you were saying in that book, the man of the superior.
The Way of the Superior Man.
The way, yeah, and that thing about getting out of your comfort zone. Um, you don't want to take too much of a. When I take my mountain bike out, I go fast, but I'm also on Coumadin because of blood clotting issues. I don't want to like crash and bleed internally and die, but I am going to go fast. I'm going to take a risk, and I am out of my comfort zone. But I try to do this, especially the past few years, to be more on the edge. If it's something like cycling, somewhat safely, or at least have a backup plan so that there's a tree that I might not miss.
Right.
There's got to be a way to dump the bike before you get there or something, but and be less hurt instead of more hurt. But
Yeah.
I feel that when I'm getting out of my comfort zone, that's where the growth occurs. And then I feel
Oh,
good because
no question.
I
Yeah.
expanded my boundaries. I love that. For me, there've been a lot of experiences in life living on somewhat of an edge and pushing the envelope.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good advice too that you gave on that. So man, we might have to do like a part two,
I'm down.
a part three. Um I don't want to keep you too late. But I've enjoyed this so much, man. I also, do you mind touching on Sanborn? You worked with David Sanborn a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Did you tour with him?
Oh, yeah.
Oh wow.
A few different times, some one-off gigs and some mostly short tours, a week or two,
Hmm.
bus tours with Don Elias. What
Oh,
fun
so I
that band was. Man, that was a fun band. Everybody, the crew too.
you
Really
might
fun.
have to we might have to do a stories interview because I know some Don Elias stories and they all make me laugh so hard.
Yeah, well, he was another very great, generous spirit, that
Yeah.
always made me feel like, I was burning even when I wasn't quite sure whether I was burning or not.
Mhm.
And, Sanborn is, I think somehow he got a little pigeonholed as a smooth jazz guy, but
Yeah.
he's way more than that.
Yeah.
And that was a really interesting gig because we would play these things. I did the smooth jazz cruise with him one time, for example, and it was really great because Dave Koz kind of fated Dave as what he was, which is sort of one of the real godfathers of the smooth jazz genre.
Yeah.
But when Dave plays, he plays the whole thing, and he's there to basically melt your face off. And yet the audience comes along with it, and that's
Yeah.
the cool thing about those gigs is that we would play like casinos down in the South and whatnot, showrooms and stuff. People would bring their date and whatever, and and the band played full tilt. Dave never told me, "Hey man, could you play a little more inside? Can you tone it down a little bit?" And the if somebody could stir the pot in a new way, then so much the better. But the audience always came along with it, and the more intense we played, uh, the more they liked it.
He's really got something special. I mean, my first experience seeing him was actually Patitucci was on bass. And this is early, just,
Interesting.
yeah, maybe 83, 84, 85. I don't know. I don't know who the drummer was, but Hiram Bullock and Ricky Peterson.
Oh boy, that's such a great band. I mean,
It,
Ricky by himself is all the band a human being could need.
I love that guy. I love that.
Yeah.
And then Hiram was Hiram, the
Yeah.
quintessential Hiram, playing his butt off, playing beautifully. And of course, he was fun to watch. And then he would come into the audience with the cordless.
Right.
I was in the balcony, the second row. He walked right in front of us and actually stopped and played a little bit. And
Right.
I mean, yeah, it's a little bit of showman stuff, but it was also really engaging,
Yeah.
and the crowd ate it up.
Sure. The other thing about Sanborn is that he has a very, very, very dry wit, like a highly evolved, very dry wit.
Hmm.
And I always tell this story that one time we were doing a theater in the round in like, I think it was in North Carolina, real old place where the stage kind of slowly rotated, and there were people seated all around.
Hmm.
And this was when I first started using a laptop. I think it was a PowerBook 2400. And I had a couple little instruments in there. And I was just taking the output from the headphone jack. And so the stage is spinning around. And, I had my email and all the other things on that computer. And as it spins around, it comes in range of a Wi-Fi network, and my email comes in. And out through the PA, Dave was like announcing, telling a joke or announcing the next tune. This thing goes ding, like 300 decibels. And I'm diving over there trying to figure out how to shut it off before it happens again. And Richard Patterson says, the bass player, he goes,
Yeah.
"Oh, look, Dave, George is checking his email in the middle of the gig." And so I said, "Oh, Dave, it's Boney James, and he's offering 75 a night. I got to take it." And Sanborn, without missing a beat, he turns around and he goes, "Yes, you do."
That's a great story, man.
Yeah, it was.
Mi hermano de otra madre is watching, Joey Fiato, Naples,
Uh,
Florida. Joey, I love you, brother. We got to get together after COVID, man. Um, so yeah, so let's see. I saw Sanborn a few more times with different people: Don Elias, Bobby Thomas, Terry Lynn, Gene Lake. Who was so
yeah,
who? So Patterson, man, that guy's
ridiculous. Yeah.
he was with Miles for a while. I heard too.
Oh yeah.
Um, which I just didn't really realize that till recently.
I think no, he wasn't the first guy to replace Marcus, but yeah, he did that gig for a while. And Gene was playing drums most of the gigs that I did.
Yeah.
Lungs was playing percussion, and Nicky Maroc, another great,
Oh yeah.
orchestrator, like thinking, arranging, rhythm section musician was playing guitar usually.
Wow, man. Yeah. So, wait, who was on percussion? Did you say?
Don Elias.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh God, I can't say my stories about him because out of respect and love for him, but they're freaking funny. Peter told me those stories. Peter Erskine. They're
Yeah,
really,
Don
really
was.
funny, man. Oh my
Yeah.
God. I only met him once for like 5 minutes, and it was at a casino here down the road, about an hour away. And he just came out. He was pretty tall, I think, right?
Oh yeah, he was a big old guy, and when he shook your hand, it was like putting your hand in a catcher's mitt, one of those.
Yeah, he dwarfed my hands, and I'm like
Right.
6'2", and I know he was taller than me because it's kind of unusual at my height to be looking up
Yeah.
to very many people. So he comes out, and he's with a friend of mine who they used to play in the Lou Rawls band together, Rick Montalbano, the genius piano player here. And actually, Ricky Jr. is married to Jane Monheit. Ricky
Yeah.
Jr. is a drummer. You might know. I think he's out in L.A. now. I mean, the guy's
Mhm.
burning. But anyways, Rick introduces me to Don, and we just like laughed for 5 minutes. I don't
And
even
that was
know what we.
Don.
I
You
don't know
know,
what we laughed about. I have no idea. But I left there with like Don Elias is the fun. That was the most fun 5 minute hang ever.
exactly. And you know, the bus hang with that band was so fun and so funny. You know, we would stay
God.
up like really, really late watching something on TV, and you know, Don, you know, Lungs, as everyone refers to him, because he had, you know, occasionally imbibed a little weed, uh, was always over at the microwave making what he called a funk stick. Time for another funk stick, and he'd
The
be over
funk
there
stick.
fired up. I think the funk sticks weren't good for him, but just don't, you know, don't get between Don and his funk sticks.
God, that's funny.
Yeah.
That's really funny. I think we're gonna have to do part two,
All
George.
right.
At some point soon. We'll do it. Yeah.
Great.
So yeah, man, this has been a lot of fun. I really,
Good.
really
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
appreciate you as a person. Now I'm getting to know you a little bit, but as a musician, of course, for decades following you, and really appreciate so much. Well, everything that I know of that you've done. I mean, you've also done a lot of other stuff. I mean, scoring some TV shows and a soap opera and all these other things. I mean, holy crap! That's and Grammy Awards. What is it? Three? How many Grammys?
Things that I produced, I think it's four. A couple Brecker Brothers. Chaka's record won, you know, something. And then one or two of Mike's and one or two of Randy's.
Oh
Something.
man. Well,
Yeah.
congratulations on all that. Extremely well deserved. And I know there are quite a few friends here watching who are musicians, and I'm getting some nice comments like they love the stories.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
There's a lot more where those came
Oh,
from.
I that's great.
Yeah.
Well, listen, again, thanks. Thanks a
My
lot. It's
pleasure.
it's it's fantastic. We'll stay in touch and do something down the road. I want to
Yeah, good.
thank you, Mom, Joey, Brian, Liz, Susanna, Adriana, all these people who were hanging out. Appreciate you joining us. I know I had a blast.
Yeah, so did I.
All right, my friend. Well, listen, I'll be in touch. Okay.
Okay, great.
Keep up the great work, and it's been a pleasure.
Okay.
All right. Take it
See you
easy,
next time.
George. You
Yep.
got it, brother. All right.
Okay. Bye.
Bye bye.